good. It's great to see you. Thanks for doing this. You know, you're our first live.
Oh, yay. That's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. So let me kickstart it by introducing you. We're excited to kickstart our first InstaLive session with the phenomenal Rachna Nivas. She was a principal dancer in Pandit Chitresh Das's dance company for 15 years before launching the bi-coastal Leela Dance Collective. A performing artist, choreographer, educator, and community organizer, Rachna is also an activist of Indian classical art. In fact, and this was really interesting to know, Rachna, activism is in your blood. Your grandparents joined the Quit India movement, refused dowries, secretly schooled Dalits, and they passed on their fighting spirit to you. I'm sure about that. And so now let's chat with this feisty dancer and discover how a first-generation Indian American became an advocate of Indian arts. Were you saying something, Rachna?
No. I was just saying that my grandparents on both sides did a lot of activism. Yes, so I'm still trying to just, stand in their shoes in any way.
You're carrying their torch forward, right? So tell me, Rachna, what got you first interested to this art form of Kathak, and how did your career as a dancer and choreographer then materialize from that?
So, it started, a lot of people assume that I started dancing Kathak as a little child, and I didn't. I was a kid. I was an undergrad at Berkeley. And I, of course, had done lots of other dances, folk dances mostly. At that time, this was the 90s, there was no such thing as Bollywood or anything like that. It was, very, the dances that we did were mostly folk. But I decided to go check out this class that was taught I heard of this master, and I was like, oh, I want to try out. I always thought Kathak was an art form, so let me try it out. It was a, time in my life when the, world was your oyster. Everything was it was just a candy store, and so it was all about exploring and finding new things. And I had absolutely no idea what I was stepping into. It was, I remember just approaching the dance studio, which was actually an ashram in San Francisco. And the building was vibrating. It was so electric, the energy. It was palpable. When I walked in, there were about 10, 12 women dripping in sweat, not looking left, not looking right. They were so focused, and the energy and power that was generated from that level of focus was so just vibrating across the walls. And then there was this little man standing in the front, and he was yelling, "Do or die." And, I was like, I thought I was coming to Indian dance class. What is this? And I proceeded to watch the rest of this class for an hour, and it completely turned my world upside down. I had no idea that Indian classical dance was this physical, had this much emotionality, this much spirituality, and that was pushing our boundaries and conditioning of psychology and of society's paradigms. And he, in particular, my Guruji, Pandit Chitresh Das, was doing this by any means necessary. He was using the modality of the dance, but then also would hold a mirror up to each student, was asking provoking questions, and had insights into every dancer's personalities, and was using those to poke and prod, but then also was teaching with an infinite generosity of spirit at the same time. It was accountability to its highest, but also generosity and love and elevation to its highest. So I really had never experienced anything like that before. I had great pride in my Indian heritage, and I was very involved in that, but it was a rude awakening, very awakening, to be like, actually, I know nothing about India. And eating Indian food and wearing Indian clothes and having Indian friends and all of that is wonderful. Going to Diwali celebrations, all is a huge, wonderful part of our culture, wonderful. But to not know of these great traditions birthed in the land and that really dismissed in the mainstream, really just lit a fire under me, and really the rest is history.
So, gosh, you've said so much, and it really wants me to ask you tons of questions. But I have one thing to ask you first.
Yes.
You were at Berkeley, and you were studying something completely different.
Oh yeah, sorry.
What were you planning to study?
I was studying, and I completed studying molecular environmental biology.
Okay, completely different. The typical Desi route, the STEM girl.
I thought I was venturing out from the typical Desi routes because I didn't want to do pre-med. I kind of did, and then I decided not to because I was like, I saw people who were coming out of med school and they were really jaded. This was at that age and in those times, which is different now. But even in the 90s, I somehow had I saw this thing that I felt like, no, that's not, I don't want that. So I'm going to go into this other area, which was more holistic and was studying the environment all the way down to microbiology and understanding the full ecosystem of biology, which is of interest to me and has actually come full circle in a lot of ways. And especially with my fellowship last year at the New York Public Library. But yeah, I thought I was kind of being different. And I'd also felt in South Asian studies as my passion major.
So tell me, rude awakening, what exactly did you discover about yourself and discover that you did not know about India that made you dump molecular biology and switch career tracks completely?
So I didn't dump it right away because, you're still, I had that idea that I was going to keep doing that and that I was going to dance at the same time. And I kept doing that for, I studied and trained and danced, even danced in the company professionally while I was continuing in that work. I worked in public health for many years, went to grad school for my master's in public health, and thought that I was going to kind of do both. And there came to be a moment, and that was in 2010, that I decided to go full time, to just go all into being a dancer and educator and all of those things. And that was a tough. It wasn't like just an easy decision. It was tough emotionally and in a conditioned way, because it's like there's no blueprint for Americans to become full-time artists. Maybe that's changing now, but wasn't then, and so I really wasn't sure. And, it's also, there's the financial aspect, and having your own independent agency, etc., was scary. It was very, but at the time, to be able to do what I love, and what I'm so passionate about entirely, and because I was offered the position by my Guruji to be the director of his institution, and that's really what catapulted that decision to be made, and that I figured, I can always come back to that. And I was really fortunate that I had the I had the support from my husband at the time, and my parents, who were scared, but they were behind me as well.
So tell me, as a South Asian, you were lucky you first tested the water at your guru's academy. Then you started the Leela Dance Collective. So as a South Asian, what are the kind of unusual obstacles you faced in setting up this institution, and any biases that come in as a woman, a performer, an artist, and a South Asian?
I mean, there's a lot, but I would say one of the big biases that comes in, South Asian women especially are very in our mainstream culture. And again, I think I keep saying this, that things are changing, because I feel like we are at this point, that things are really blowing up on so many levels for women in general, for South Asians in different areas. And so, but having said that, I do think for the most part, there is an exotification. And I think what that means is that people want to see pretty brown girls dancing with colorful costumes.
That's superficial, to say the least.
Yeah, and that's come up a lot. I will I've done so many performance productions, and we would be working for a year on this, and then there would be like at the end, after the show, people would be like, you're like dripping in sweat, and you just did this super complex, rhythmic mathematical compositions. Stamina requires strength and endurance, and people's costume is so beautiful. There's fascination with our clothes and our, various things like that. Our guru, he actually was aware of this, because we would complain about it. And one of our productions, he decided to eliminate that costume entirely and made us wear A-line kurta, black kurtas completely, which is more you see more in modern and contemporary dance.
Right.
It wasn't even like shaping our bodies at all. It was like almost like a totally androgynous kind of a kurta. And of course, after we did that show, after the show, everyone was like, this was powerful. Everybody was like, you guys are so strong. And then that was like, okay, this worked. But we were kind of like, so we had to hide our femininity in order to, be recognized for being strong and powerful.
Right.
So, and another time where we were presenting Leela Dance Collective, we were presenting one of our productions. A venue was wanting to present one of our productions, Son of the Wind, and where we are all playing male characters, all female. We're playing male characters, sort of tradition, because in the old days it was actually all male dancers who played the female characters and the male characters. So that's what we were doing. And when we told the sponsor that this is the production we were doing, they were like, oh, we thought you were going to be doing one of those other shows with those beautiful costumes.
Oh, well, you win some, you lose some, don't you? But so tell me, there are many South Asian dancers now. Do you ever collaborate with them? And do they also have these same kind of issues that you did, that people only comment on our clothes and costumes, and they don't really look beyond it at the message that our dance is bringing across? One of the things I gather from what Pandit Chitresh Das did to you was he put a mirror in front of you for you to reflect yourself. And so, other than just the dancers, what about yourself have you seen in your dance that you bring out? And do you discuss that with other dancers?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. There's lots more dancers who are pursuing the arts, and etc. I have focused a lot on collaborations with well, we've only had, since my guru passed, we've, have a collaboration in particular, and that's with, not with South Asian dancers, but it's with tap dance. So it's outside of, Indian culture. But I have watched my guru have collaborations with other other South Asian dancers, and I got to have a front seat, and he did a collaboration with Kathakali, actually, and Balinese, which was quite incredible and phenomenal. He also had done collaborations with Bharatanatyam dancers. So, that's definitely something that I would love to do, as me and my fellow artistic directors continue to, create new work. So, yeah.
So in this pursuit of yours to showcase Indian culture and art through your dance, how do you strike the balance between tradition and innovation? The way your guru did all this with Balinese and Kathakali. And...
Yeah, it's, I actually get asked this a lot. And it's actually a balance that can only be, I believe it can only be struck if you have studied very deeply the tradition. Because it's not something that it's not a formula that I'm constantly, like, I wasn't taught, oh, this is crossing the line too much, and this is not crossing the line. It's actually something that comes from so much knowledge, so much lived experience of understanding every nuance of the tradition, that it's very natural when you're innovating, where you can, I can kind of cross a little bit here and push this boundary, because it's coming from a place of understanding the tradition very deeply. And this was chiseled and honed and hammered into us. And not only by my Guruji. Many of the other masters talk about this a lot, which is first study for a long time in the tradition before having the audacity to go out and experiment and innovate. And that was a word a lot. Don't have the audacity to do that unless you have so much knowledge that it's natural to maintain the tradition and push boundaries. Because that's the only way Indian classical art evolves in a way of integrity. It evolves, very much evolves, but it evolves slowly.
Yeah. I remember, I myself am a student of Bharatanatyam, which I did as a kid. And I remember I used to do the bend down, hands straight. It used to go on forever and ever for years without moving on, because you need to understand that basic stuff before you can move on. You have a lot of students. I know I attended one of your shows and I met Indian and non-Indian. What do you think is the most important thing about your South Asian culture and dance that you feel you need to pass on to them, that they need to study as you're teaching them and training them?
I mean, there's many things, but discipline, work, no shortcuts.
Exactly.
That again, no, there are no shortcuts. And I that because that actually that's pushing back on a lot of things that we're taught in mainstream culture right now. In our, I think, a lot about the depth that the art has to offer, and that many of these kinds of arts offer, and what it takes. If you want the nectar of going deep vertically into something versus horizontally, and having content and information. I mean, information is not knowledge. Content is not knowledge, and knowledge is not wisdom. Knowledge,
interesting,
great,
yeah.
but wisdom comes only from time and from living it and failing and trying and failing and trying. So these are some of the values that our Indian, classical traditions really teach, are embedded. And the unfolding of mentorship relationship between, whatever you want to call it, Guru Shishya Parampara, you can call it mentorship, but the importance of trust and surrendering to that relationship is very, very nuanced and challenging in this era when there's an open market, there's a lot out there. But that is what I teach, to still value these things, and I'm always continually surprised how much people actually want that if you offer it.
That's what I was going to ask you. So have your students learned to accept that, and do they go with that? And you have non-Indian students who don't understand the Guru Shishya Parampara. How do they take it? So do you see amongst your students somebody who will be able to take the torch forward the way you did for your Guruji? I can't hear you. Now I can, yeah.
Yes. So sorry, you were saying non-Indians? Yes. To be very frank, it doesn't matter at this point. It's non-Indian, to be very honest. I mean, yes, those who are born and raised in India understand a little bit more of this concept, but even that is, starting to go. And look, relationship is relationship, whether it's with their partner, whether it's with their
guru.
It's the same thing. And the way that I am always telling my students is that these are embodied knowledge. The knowledge only lives in human beings. It does not live in books. It does not live on YouTube. It does not live in inorganic spaces.
Or AI.
Does not live in AI. Contrary to what, we can keep trying to download it, but that's not how art works. And so the only way you can truly learn it is transmit it from human being to human being. And that transmission can only happen through trust, and only you don't trust a person right away, as you could.
Yeah.
And so it is the unfolding relationship, and that is a two-way street. The mentor is learning at the same time how to teach that particular person, how to transmit that, this to that person. And they have to make their own sacrifices of getting to know this person, understanding where they're coming from, what era they have grown up in, what their background is, whether they come from a white family in Louisiana, or from, a black family in Harlem, or raised in Mumbai, or raised in a rural area of India. I mean, or ABCD, quote unquote, like me.
Yeah.
I am always constantly learning what lens are people looking at me from, and how can I tailor and reach that through that lens.
And talking about this lens, how do you perceive the evolution of the Indian classical arts in the United States, since we're here for the, and what do you envision for its future?
What do I want?
Envision, want, okay.
I want Indian classical art to be recognized and seen for what it is. Rather than it be constantly trying to be put in a square, round hole, all the time in different ways, by South Asians, by Western white institutions, by everyone, because it is about understanding that it is in its own place. Have all the other things. That's what a society is. That's what makes a society rich and diverse. Have pop culture. We're always going to have pop culture, but understand what falls under that. What is, what's problematic is when there's very little knowledge of understanding the distinction between things. People know that ballet is not the same thing as, Britney Spears,
Yeah,
myself, because that's like,
that's fine. But so in one line or a couple of lines, what would you explain to somebody if they say, what is Indian dance? Classical. What is Indian dance? What should it be understood as?
I mean, again, there's so many categories, right? There's a classical dance, and within classical dance, there's 8 different distinct forms of it from different regions that all have different histories and vocabularies and extreme intricacies that take a lifetime to master. There's folk dances, and there's hundreds of folk dances that also have their own, places and, context for why they were created and performed, and for what, often connected to land and connected to climate.
Yeah. But what does it mean to you?
Meaning,
what does Indian dance mean to you? What does it bring out in you?
What does it mean to me? Well, I mean, if you ask me what it means to me, I would then go a little bit more broad, because dance in and of itself forces us to connect with our bodies, first of all. And we live in a society where we are constantly conditioned to be disconnected from our bodies.
It's interesting.
From the day we're born, because we are living in a Western civilization, which is very, very much to disconnect, even from the moment you were born. So dance, you can't hide. You have to feel, you end up feeling everything. And once you start connecting with your body, with the cells in your body, there's an awakening. And once you start having that kind of an awakening, it's very difficult to go back. You see, you see more, you see perspective change, you see life in a very different way. It is a way of expanding your sense of humanity, your sense of so I would say that. And for me, Indian dance in particular, because it's my heritage, because it comes from my own ancestors, because it's been passed down generationally in my blood, and in the land, that my ancestors come from, I feel, a very, very close connection and responsibility, very big responsibility to not only maintain it, to spread it, to expand the perceptions of it, misconceptions of it, and to bring access for people to be able to benefit from it more. Because remember, it was, very tragically, access was blocked during British rule.
Yeah.
So British rule very systematically marginalized these art forms, forced them to go underground and block access to all the masses. So I feel, a sense of responsibility, which is why I took it on.
I was going to say, we've been chatting for 30 minutes, and I was going to, I told you 30 minutes, and then we're going to end the InstaLive. But there was one more question I did want to ask you. If you can tell us briefly, what made you choose reclaiming the divine feminine and portraying Kali? Because for us women, South Asian women, she's the ultimate in, feistiness and fighting for ourselves. And can you just tell us a little bit about that?
So, reclaiming the divine feminine is a work that, in particular, is showcasing and bringing to life the tantric philosophy of the feminine principle, which is actually very different from mainstream Hinduism's idea of even goddess Kali. Now, she is very fierce and powerful, even in our mainstream Hinduism, and she's been being called down a lot these days, which is very nice, which is really wonderful to see. But I was very, very moved and really had a very experience studying Tantra, because in Tantra, Kali, and there are 10 wisdom goddesses actually. Kali is the only one that's more well known. The other 9, nobody even knows. South Asians themselves know very little about Tantra.
The Mahavidyas.
Yes, the Mahavidyas, because it's very elusive and, just not, it's not very well known. And so, but in it, Kali is not a consort. None of the goddesses are consorts to a male deity. They, in fact, the belief is that everything is centered around the feminine principle, or the divine feminine, and that everything, the feminine energy pervades all things in time and space, and that all creation comes from that energy, and that the male experience of physical life only occurs through the feminine, and that is the concept. It is killing patriarchal paradigm, and that was very powerful for me, because all these goddesses are not they're independent, they are autonomous entities. They are not necessarily mothers. They are not demon slayers protecting the world as these mother figures, and they are not wives and consorts of of men who are and protecting. And yes, they're shown as fierce, but they are not associated. Actually, in fact, in Tantra, the goddesses all have their foot on Shiva, because he is completely still and useless without her energy activating him. And so that's just kind of what about Tantra. And so for me, this is a time in my life where, I've been, just finding that unapologetic living of the paradoxes of feminine energy, because we tend to feel a lot of guilt for these paradoxes. And this show is about telling these stories that that really, disintegrate that kind of thinking, that sort of mentality, and allow us to be strong and soft, ugly and beautiful, raging and loving, compassionate and,
cruel.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. No, it just makes so much sense the way you put it. And we've had a lot of people joining in. I hope they take that away with them, because I think this collective female energy unleashed on the world could actually make a huge difference. And, more and more people buying into that.
I just want to say that, we're really living in a very remarkable time. I know that there's often this feeling like, oh my God, everything's a mess and we're digressing. And I actually want to take a different point of view. I don't think that's actually, I think that things are changing. There are tectonic shifts going on, and it's messy. And so it looks like that right now. But it has never, ever been a greater day to be alive as a woman as it is today. And, well, I shouldn't say never. Pre-patriarchy.
Yeah. Well, cheers for that. And just final word of advice to younger South Asian women living, in India or in the diaspora who want to, have a career in the arts. Anything you'd like to tell them?
Yes, do it with love and from the soul. You can't do it from spreadsheets. You can't do it through planning. I know everybody's, like, oh, I have to plan this by this, and you have to let go of it. And art is learned from the heart and from the soul, and that takes time in a society because of the way we're not intellectual. And lastly, find a mentor. And when you're looking for the mentor, don't base it on how many followers they have or how fancy their media is. Base it on what you feel in your gut when you interact with them, in your gut. That's what you should, and on their experience and background in studying that craft. How much have they truly studied that craft?
That's fantastic words of wisdom. Love and a mentor who you feel from your gut. Rachna, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and thank you to everybody who joined us on our InstaLive. Look out for our next one. It's going to be about female health on Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you.
Monika,
take care.
And to EkWomen for this. I'm honored to be the first Instagram Live.
Awesome. Thanks. Take care. Have a good weekend. Bye. Bye.